everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of High Spirits. I'm Ben Larson, and I'm flying solo today. We're recording Thursday, June 27th, 2024, and we have a great show talking about THC distribution in the mainstream. We got on my friend Scott O'Malley from the CLRTY Company, and we're going to dive into all things distribution in the mainstream THC alcohol channels. But before we get there, I'm going to do my little thing. I don't fly solo too often, but I thought I'd go through some recent news just to kind of talk about what's top of mind, what's guiding the way I am thinking. So let's bring up some news articles here. We have Marijuana Moment reporting on a GOP congressional panel that's moving to block marijuana rescheduling while amending medical cannabis riders with penalties for sales near school. Thank you, Kyle Yeager, for the headline there. That's a little concerning. It's just goes to show that rescheduling is not yet a done deal. There's a long way to go before we see that implemented. The other concerning aspect here is that, without a Cole memo, this is kind of the first, or maybe not the first, but another step that we see in federal overreach into the regulated markets. So hopefully this gets stopped dead in its tracks, but we will see. Certainly something worth tracking. In addition to that, new Tennessee laws are tackling regulations and banning Delta 8. And I think this goes into effect July 1st. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit with Scott. So this is hemp-derived Delta 8. It's become famous a lot for its chemical conversion, but Delta 8 is a compound that is naturally found in the plant. And so without any defined limits established in this legislation in Tennessee, it leaves a lot of ambiguity what that means for full plant extracts. So again, just, as we've been talking about in the news, the pendulum is swinging. And when it's swinging fast and hard and we don't have responsible regulations going into place, there are some very confusing ambiguities that can be implemented. Moving a little bit away from the direct industry, there are some things that are happening kind of tangentially that I think is interesting signals. And the first one that came up for me, Ben and AnnaRae, who is sick today. Sorry, I didn't acknowledge that. AnnaRae is out sick. She wishes she could be here. She's sorry she's not here. This news article came from her, and as well as the insights. But Walgreens is bringing CBD into their main shelves. So they're identifying space in the store. They're pushing things aside and placing it where they believe it belongs. And in this case, topicals, pain relief, and whatnot. But interesting to see them taking this move and what it might mean for the future product line extensions, cannabinoid extensions, but does bring up an interesting point about where do hemp, CBD, and other compounds belong in the stores. So watch that as it continues to develop. Similarly, we see the FDA potentially reversing their order on Juul vaping products. And so, as we start to see retailers struggle about where and how to sell vape products, largely in the hemp space, bringing nicotine vapes back into vogue. We will see. But again, maybe creating space for a future cannabis and or hemp industry. So that's my run of the news for today. I won't bore you with it anymore. It's just what's kind of top of mind. I'm going to jump right into it and get Scott on the line. Scott, again, is the CEO of the CLRTY Company. They're low-dose THC hemp-infused beverages, born out of the homeland of Minnesota. Scott is just outside the Twin Cities. He's also a seasoned entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience across various industries. His expertise in strategy, sales, and client relationships has positioned him as a visionary leader, driving his company to innovate in this dynamic hemp beverage space. So, Scott, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning. How are you doing, man? How's the week going?
The week's going well. I appreciate you having me on here. I'm excited to have a conversation and see where it takes us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Catch us up to speed. Tell us a little bit about the company. How long have you guys been operating? What was the genesis of you jumping into this wild west of hemp THC? And yeah, let us know a little bit about the size of your team before we kind of jump into the strategy and everything.
Gotcha. We were in the CBD and Delta-8 business previously. And when we got word in the middle of May of 2022 that the law was going to change in Minnesota, we had been experimenting with a beverage for CBD and potentially Delta-8. We pivoted as fast as we could. And by August of 2022, we had our first SKU of seltzer in the marketplace. We tried to self-distribute for about a month, figured out quickly that was difficult and we weren't very good at it. So we connected with a distributor network and started putting that process together. It took a little while. It took a few months to get all of that done, but we've grown quite fast. I mean, it is the Wild Wild West, and it certainly was the first year. They put some fixes into the law that began in July of 23, which made it a little bit easier for us to maneuver in, meaning that there were some rules and regulations that helped clear up some of the confusion, particularly at liquor store and on-premise bar restaurant levels. Right now we've got seven full-time employees, and then about 14 part-time people that serve various functions for us. As a startup, you're always about 2 people behind, but you kind of wear a lot of hats in the beginning, and then as you grow, you start to fill in with some experts in different categories.
Yeah, I feel that. As you're building your team, who are the kind of like profiles that you're looking for? Are you pulling in directly from beverage categories? Is it helpful to have people with hemp and or cannabis knowledge? Yeah, let us know kind of, and what has it resulted in? Like, what are some of the kind of profiles of some of the key employees in the company?
Yeah, we definitely lean on the beverage industry. We've got a number of people who've been in the beverage industry their entire lives. And so, we've got 25, 35-year veterans of the beverage business. And I would say that there's a vernacular to the beverage business that's you don't find in some of the other industries. A lot of acronyms. I'm often stopping conversations saying, wait, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. So we have beverage industry veterans. That way we can speak the language, with our distributor partners or with other brands. And then beyond that, we look for people who have retail experience. So building brands, creatives, copywriters, social media, all of that kind of comes together as you try to build a brand, and you really have 2 relationships. You have a relationship with your distribution partners, and then you have relationships at some level with the consumer of trying to help drive your brand. And then you kind of get that in-between stage where you're dealing with retailers, whether that's on-premise or off-premise, trying to put programs together all in the name of building the brand and increasing velocity in all of those locations.
Yeah, very interesting. It's I've often said that the cannabis beverage or THC beverage space is inherently different than all the other form factors that you find in a dispensary, right? And it's not necessarily a THC alternative, it's more of a beverage alternative. And so focusing on building teams that reflect more of a classic beverage company versus the diversity that you get in a typical cannabis or hemp company. Earlier you were mentioning kind of going from self-distribution into a more traditional distribution network. I'm curious, actually, what it made me think about was kind of the nature of direct-to-consumer shipping, creating an online presence. versus doing all the groundwork to do distribution. And I think there's a lot of conversation lately, even in the beverage category, which shipping beverage all around the United States is an interesting prospect of in its own. But like, how are you thinking about direct to consumer online presence versus building the brand in the traditional retail market?
Our focus has been and will be, sales in the distribution channel. So through liquor stores, through grocery stores, through C stores. That's been our focus so far. And I think that there are other companies out there that are doing it differently, right? So, there are companies that start with distributors, convert most of their sales to direct to consumer, and then they go that route. That's not the way that we're going to go. We have an online presence, but we don't push it very much. It's fine line, if your best customers are your retailers that are selling your product, and then you go online and you start selling it at a discount lower than what they could buy it for, or at the same price that they can buy it for, suddenly they're starting to look at you like, hey, are we really partners in this? So for us, it's been, trying to kind of walk that fine line of making sure that we're not selling it at a price less than what our retailers can sell it for. Otherwise, they don't have a lot of motivation to be pushing your product, and we need them pushing the product in order to build a brand. And so that's our strategy. It's not every brand's strategy, but it's certainly ours. We think that building this network and kind of through this 3-tier system makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of age gating and some of the rules and regulations around it that make us pretty comfortable and make our distributor partners pretty comfortable.
I think you touched on something that's super insightful. When I worked with tech companies, we talked a lot about customer confusion and pushing founders to truly understand who their customer is versus who the consumer is. Can we dive into that a little bit? Like, can you talk about identifying the retailer as the customer and what that means and how that drives your decision making, and then we can kind of get into the interplay of also understanding who the consumer is, but how that all relates back to being a better product for your customer, who is the retailer. Right. I think it's a really interesting concept.
So I think that we run parallel paths on trying to talk and communicate with our customer, who is really the retailer, as well as the consumer itself, and so we spend resources at the distribution level, having communication with those area managers and those reps. We also spend resources and have people in the marketplaces talking to retailers, because in the end, they're the ones pushing your product and they're helping you build the brand. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't also spend resources on the consumer, because we're trying to do that at the same time. So, our client is the retailer. That's the person who has their products out for sale. But we're also trying to communicate with the consumer, really digging into who the consumer is, why they buy our stuff, why they might buy someone else's products. And we're in the middle, while we're getting close to the end of a research project on our consumers. So who's buying it? Who's buying other people's products? Why are they buying it? When are they buying it? What are they using it for? What's the occasion? And we're gathering all that information, which I think, for the most part, we think we know, but we wanted to make sure that we knew. And so some of that consumer insight will then help us with retails. It'll definitely help us with distributors. And then we'll kind of look at that and start to weave some of that information into our approach and our strategy when we talk about whether we're marketing to consumers or marketing to the or having communication with those retailers. So it's definitely intertwined, and it's not the same conversation. It's a little bit different when you're talking to a retailer than it is if you're trying to talk directly to consumer. And we've got programs that we do for both areas, and kind of treat them both as clients.
What are some of the mechanisms that you're doing to go out and get that data? Because what we hear a lot in the industry is that data is hard to find. Nielsen's isn't doing this. BDSA and Headset aren't doing it. So are you out there like pounding the pavement and gathering the data yourself, or are retailers helping you out with some of this?
A little bit of both. So we're out doing our own, surveys on price and who's in the market and who's selling and gathering information from our retail partners. We've done this research project into the consumer habits, so we're gaining some insight there on it's kind of the buying patterns and the buying habits, what's helping them make their decision. I don't know that in this industry yet that any particular brand has risen to the top, or even a group of brands that are definitely defined in all of the different states that people are in as, hey, that's the top brand, or that's one of them. We aspire to be there for sure, but I don't think it's there yet. And I think there's a lot of curiosity, and I think there's a lot of testing and sampling and experimentation within the industry. So we're trying to stay in the forefront, make sure that we have as much data as possible. But you're right, it's hard to get to right now. It's not readily available. And so there's a little bit of guesswork to it. Frankly, in this business, because it's still the wild, wild west, there's a lot of guesswork into this category in general.
Yeah, well, with the interest and the momentum that we see, I think it'll only be a matter of time before people start really wrapping their arms around this. I know there's been a lot of conversations in the associations and how do we, create category codes for the products and get that into the data collection engines. But speaking more tactically, when you're talking to a retailer and you're starting to get to understand your consumer better, what are some of the talking points that are helping you frame up the pitch to the retailers and distributors that are setting you apart? Like, what are they asking for? What do they really want to see?
Well, I think it's a number of things. One, it's education. So how do you sell it to the consumer? What's your product? How do you differentiate yourself from some of the other brands that are out there? And there's a lot of brands right now, a lot of SKUs, right? So, it's giving them the education of, hey, look, our seltzers have 0 carbs, 0 sugar, 0 sweeteners, 0 calories, right? Our cold brew coffee product is very unique in that it has no preservatives and is shelf stable, doesn't need to be refrigerated. And it's a really tasty product. So it's new and it's, and it's unique, right? So I think they're looking for things that they can communicate to the customer that comes in on how to sell the product and what the highlights are. And then I think they're looking for activity. How do we help them move more product more quickly? And so that's with programming and end caps and displays and stacks and collateral and all the different things that we look at. We do some giveaways once in a while. We'll do some rebates, that kind of stuff. So it's really just working with them, and they know their customer way better than I do. They know their clientele, and so we just have conversations. Say, look, what do you think about doing this? What if we did this? And then we try to put a plan together with that retailer for a length of time. We often will do 6-month, 1-year programs where we're planning out that far and saying, all right, look, in this month we're going to do this. We're going to take a little break. We're going to come back with this other product. We're launching our soda pot product next month, so that'll be new. We're launching some variety packs. Well, actually, some of them out today for the first day, and then there'll be some more in the variety pack for soda pot. So, you give them a little bit of lead time on some of the things that are coming, and they get excited about it, and then you can put programs together. But it's really strategic about, look, we want to be part of your display 6 months out of 12. It's not always every other month. Sometimes it's, there's certain times that we definitely want to be the focus of someone when they walk into that store and they see our stuff. It's not necessarily always on sale. Oftentimes it is, but that's not necessarily always the driver. It's really getting that exposure and then doing some interesting things that maybe are a little bit out of the box to attract the consumer and give the retailer something to talk about.
Yeah, I think that I didn't know. It's like I've always known that it takes more than a product, right? And I never understood that you can actually come in with those 6 or 12-month plans of really this is what you're going to expect from us as a brand and how we're going to be a great partner. I think that's super helpful because I work with a lot of startups. They get super excited, pumped about their brand. They get it into co-packing. They get, they see it come off the shelf. And then, I don't hear this part of the business all that often. And, hopefully, people pick up on this. I will give you huge kudos. I have a couple here in my fridge. Like the 𝐵𝐴𝐚𝐢𝐳𝐚 product is fantastic. The flavors are there. There's a lot of high sugary beverages on the market. Some, as high, if not higher than, a standard, Coca-Cola or something like that.
Yeah.
But your new products, the coffees, I'm gonna out my wife. Like this has become her favorite way to kick off a weekend is get the energy and the relaxation at the same time. So
I know I liked your wife.
Okay, so let's talk about like the putting this all into action and getting the distribution. I hope you don't mind me saying CLRTY is not the biggest name going out there, but to your point, there is not a biggest yet, and there's a little bit of, we've talked offline, there's a little bit of rhyme or reason to how fast to grow a brand in the current state of the market, and a lot of that has to do with distribution relationships. Distribution relationships can get you very quick access to shelves and prominence, but it also could become a limiter at a certain point. So I want to kind of get into the kind of strategy and the dynamics about selecting your distributors and how fast is fast enough for, at least in your case. Everyone's strategy is different. Not one is necessarily better than the other, but how are you thinking about it?
It's actually changed a little bit, even in just the last 2 years. We were fortunate to connect with the Anheuser-Busch network for Minnesota. They've been a good partner for us. And so, we tend to look at those more macro type distributors. But, when you think about distribution in a particular state, we really take it on a state-by-state basis. And the team gets together and we talk about it. And I've got 4 people that we all meet. They are all industry veterans. They know the distributors. And that's the distributor. You can look at distribution and say, hey, look, we can go with a macro distributor. We could go with a wine and spirits distributor. We could go with a craft distributor. We can go with an independent distributor. They all have their pluses and minuses. And then there's even now a few distributors that are popping up that are THC-centric distributors. So, it can be a different strategy from state to state. It makes it a little bit more difficult because if you become used to sort of the template of working with a type of distributor, it's a little easier to put the programs in. You understand each other's business. When you switch back and forth from, let's say, an independent distributor to a macro distributor, the vernacular is the same, but the implementation can be a little bit different. So when we look at it, we do it on a state-by-state basis. And we have different strategies depending on the state and what we think that state's potential can be. So there are times when we look at a state and we're like, all right, in that particular state, we want to be one of the first 5 or 6 brands in that state because it's important. We may look at a different state and say, hey, we definitely want the right partner here, and the right partner isn't quite ready to go yet, so we're going to hold off. We have that discussion every week about particular states, and I will tell you that our team is often split on which approach to take. We don't always have the same opinion, so we kind of go through it and we look at all of the options, and there's some nuances to those different types of distribution, and then what they might mean if you do something in this state. How does that transfer to maybe an adjoining state, or even one that isn't adjoining? So there's more thought that goes into it than just taking the first one that says yes. And so and we've played it right a few times and we got it wrong a few times. And you just kind of learn a little bit and try to make the right decisions. But in the end, sometimes I think that there may not be a wrong decision early on in this industry where we are now, because we're really in the infancy. Maybe we're a toddler now, but it's the beginning of an industry that is likely to disrupt the beverage industry on some level. In Minnesota, liquor store sales are now reaching 10 to 15% of total revenue within the liquor store. It took craft beer 20 years to get there. It took THC beverages less than 18 months.
That is wild.
So that's it's a fascinating number. It gets everybody's attention, and there are still a lot of distributors who are sitting on the sidelines saying, "Hey, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure what this means from a legality standpoint with their federal licenses." And so putting that team together, putting that right partnership group together in a particular state, at times can be kind of like putting a puzzle together and trying to make sure that when you get to the end, you don't have three pieces that don't go anywhere.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen some of the commentary on those numbers where people are saying, oh, this is a novelty product, it's going to be a flash in the pan, a lot of dissent out there. But sitting in Minnesota, now that you've had, a couple years now of this kind of legalized market, what is your feeling or response to commentary like that?
I think that it might have been maybe a knee-jerk reaction to the industry in the beginning. I think that there's probably some validity to it in the beginning because there were some bad actors within the space that were producing products that weren't really very good or didn't have the right potency or maybe didn't have the correct potency. But I think that what we see is that it's hitting the mark for some consumers. And it's a replacement for alcohol for some people. It's a complementary product for people who don't want to drink quite as much as they used to. It fits with the lifestyle for certain groups. And I think the medicinal properties of it, which will become more and more relevant in the years to come as more and more research is done, and you can pinpoint maladies for pain, sleep, anxiety, women's health, that kind of thing. You'll see products that are specific to helping those. So I have a hard time believing this is a flash in the pan. It doesn't have this crazy amount of growth in 18 months. And realistically, it's really 12 months of where sales are really been booming. I just think it's something that the marketplace is looking for. It's a low dose product. It's not, someone who smokes every day, this is not their product. They could drink 4 of our drinks and go work out and feel fine. But for a certain part of the population and a certain group of consumers, this product has resonated, and it's filling a void that was in people's lives.
Well, yeah, and you yourself entered the industry because of the medical benefits of the plant, and so that's an interesting connection to see that. I found myself in a lot of arguments, conversations, whatever you want to call it, where people are saying weed is not a replacement for alcohol. Look how it makes you feel so differently. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. And there's 2 things that I've arrived at. One, society has been forced into using alcohol as a tool to address various maladies. And often it's not the right tool, but it's the tool that you have in your toolbox that's legal. And now we're finding that, maybe I shouldn't have been using alcohol for this, but a THC drink is a perfectly good tool, and in fact, a better one that I can be using in these particular instances. So that's one aspect. So like a alcohol replacement, I think people get hung up on that as it's an analog to alcohol, which maybe some formulator out there creates a perfectly great combination of cannabinoids and terpenes to actually achieve that. I haven't seen it yet, but it is replacing where alcohol was being misused in society. And then the other aspect is that people are spending good money at a bar or restaurant and they want to feel something. They don't want to just spend that on a non-alcoholic drink. No offense to those drinking non-alcohol or on the total sobriety chain. I love you. But people want something if they're spending money like in a social setting. And this is, again, filling a void that previously existed.
Yeah, I think it definitely is filling a void. I personally really enjoy using them together. I like drinking our product or frankly one of our competitors' products along with an alcoholic drink or two. But I can tell you that I drink a lot less alcohol, and I've now thrown a CLRTY in there, so it's really having a water, and I feel a lot better the next day. And as I get older, I do not like the hangover anymore. And a lot of my friends and the people that I talk to, we used to maybe use that hangover, wear that hangover as a badge of honor, but I'm not interested in that anymore. And so, I can go out with my friends and they may have, I'm not going to put a number out there, but a number of beers. I'll have, one of our drinks and maybe one drink, and I'll feel the same as they do. But, I'm going to wake up the next morning feeling pretty good, and they're going to wake up a little sluggish, and it does make a difference. And I think that, these products, particularly right now, are pretty easy for people to use for sleep. They're pretty easy to use to help with anxiety, and pretty easy to use to mitigate some pain, without being specific about making claims about it. But people are experimenting with it, and they're figuring it out, how to use it and how it works for them. And the fact that it's fast acting, so it's kicking in at about the same time that an alcoholic drink would. You're not getting. There's so many people have stories, including me, of, I tried a gummy and then I waited 20 minutes, and I tried another one and I waited 20 minutes, and I took a third one, and then they all ganged up, and suddenly I was not exactly feeling the way I wanted to feel originally. This is a much different deal now with nano-emulsified emulsion. It's fast onset. You're not getting what I call over the tips. You're getting to where you want to be for whatever that's for. Including if you want to catch a little buzz on it, but you can get to where you want to be, and you can maintain that for as long as you want to without, continuing to escalate, which typically, at least for me, can happen in alcohol.
Yeah. I'm glad you point out the interplay of THC and alcohol. I'm a fan of the classic crossfade. And it's been an interesting relationship between cannabis and alcohol and regulations, and I know Minnesota has gone on this journey themselves. Like, I think there was a time where they said you couldn't serve a patron a THC beverage if they had consumed an alcohol beverage within like 5 hours. It was something ridiculous that was, like you read it and like, this is impossible to enforce. How does this even get this far? What is the current situation in Minnesota? I think they've done away with that.
That law never went into effect. I think the legislators knew that was going to be a problem. They had told us early on that this will get fixed before it goes into effect. It was supposed to go into effect July 1st of this year. They fixed it in this last session. What I will say is they did a pretty good job in Minnesota, because there really were only 3 fixes that needed to be taken care of in the bill. They took care of those. That is not an issue anymore, mainly because it doesn't make sense, and enforcement would have been darn near impossible.
Man, what is that like, living in a state where you identify issues and then you rectify them before it becomes law? That must be, it sounds like a dream.
It can be, but it's always a process, right? And so, you've got different factions that have different ideas of what they want to have happen. So we do spend a decent amount of time with conversations with our lawyers, conversations with lobbyists, conversations with the legislature in a number of different states now. As they put this together, I think that Minnesota did a really good job with this bill. I wish other states would use it as a template. Some are, but then you get the outliers who want to throw something interesting in, like Iowa decided to make a 4 milligram per serving law when everywhere else in the country it's 5. So that means everybody would have to change their packaging in order to be compliant within Iowa. But it also means you're now out of compliance in other states if you try to put more than 2 servings into a can. So I think I understand what they were trying to do, which was to protect the smaller businesses and really the breweries and producers in the state of Iowa. But in the end, they're really just punishing the consumer, because a lot of the bigger, better brands are not going to go there because they're going to change all their packaging. They're selling all over the country for one state.
Well, not to mention that most small brands have aspirations of growing into bigger brands. And if you're an Iowa-based company and you might have a leg up to get started, but the minute you want to scale beyond Iowa, then you're totally handcuffed.
For sure.
At least as handcuffed as everyone else trying to get into the state. So there's been a lot of shifting legislation lately, both at this various state levels and at the federal level. Bring it back to the distributors a little bit. How is that affecting sentiment this year? Or I said, well, this part of this year. So call it Q2 compared to like the beginning of the year.
I would say that it has changed somewhat dramatically. I think that the distributor network, and it doesn't matter at what level, whether it's the macro distributors, wine and spirits, the craft or the independents, they all at one time were looking at this saying, hey, look, am I putting my federal license in jeopardy here? They've done their due diligence. The National Beer Wholesalers Association came out with some guidance against it. And so it took people a while, and it took a number of the distributors and their lawyers to work through whether there really is risk here or how much risk. And in the end, distributors started to feel like they had the information they needed and they were okay moving forward. They were not putting their national license in jeopardy. So that pace of acceptance and distributors looking at getting into the market in the last 45 to 60 days has increased dramatically. And I think part of it is that there were a couple of really big distributors throughout the country who looked at the category and said, we're getting into it, we've done our diligence, and we're comfortable with where we're at and what the risk is. And when a big distributor decides that they've done their diligence and they're okay, somebody that's maybe half that size might go, well, geez, they sell a whole lot more than we do. If they don't think it's an issue, then why do we? But there's also ownership groups who just are against the category in general. And so you get a little bit of resistance there. And then some of the legislatures in some of the states have made some noise that they don't like it, or they don't want it, or they want to regulate it, or they want to tax it. And so there's a number of factors that can make people a little bit fearful. But you're talking about a high margin, high priced item. And I think in the end, they look at it and then they assess, what the risk tolerance is. And for the most part, I think the distributors are starting to say, look, this is a category that's not going away. This is a category that's good for us to be in. And I think that liquor store chain and that age gating is the appropriate place for these products to be. They're used to checking age verification, and they're already used to the way things are delivered and the way things are presented and how this whole industry works. So to me, it makes sense to be there. We're still going to be in vape shops and tobacco shops and C-stores and that sort of thing also. But I think the majority of the sales direct to consumer, or direct from the retailer to the consumer, is going to be where they already go to buy beer, wine, spirits, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. So you were talking earlier about being in the AB InBev distribution network, and to my knowledge, there's a lot of like independently owned AB approved or relationship distributors, depending on the regions that you're in. What does it mean to be working with an AB distributor, and are there relationships that leads to, like in other markets, I guess what's the dynamic once you're in that relationship, and how do those networks, I guess maybe lean on each other, relate to each other, or if at all?
Well, there is some influence. We can reach out to our distributors and say, hey, we'd really like to work with this distributor in the state. Can you make an introduction? We've got 3 people on our team who've dealt with distributors throughout the country their entire careers, so those relationships already exist. And it's not just the AB network; it's the Miller Coors, Molson Coors. It's the wine and spirits groups. There's a couple of those that are pretty big and have a lot of coverage. So I think we we look at all of those, but that relationship really is, you kind of get it started. You gauge the interest of them. You gauge the timing of when they want to enter this market. A number of those distributors are setting up their own LLCs to handle this product, to give them a little bit of a firewall to their main corporation, which has this federal license. And then it's really dialogue with these distributors. And we have every year we have these marketing meetings or planning meetings for the next year, where we go through and we say, look, here's what happened this year. Here's what we're looking to have happen next year. Here's what we want to do together. Get their input, start implementing action items, and then put those into place. So we try to have a cadence with our distributors on a weekly basis at some level. And that goes sometimes down to, our people going out and riding around with reps and meeting with key accounts. And so it's, it kind of is an all-encompassing effort together to try to make this our brand a winning brand, and to try to support them in whatever way that we can, so that they're getting us what we need.
Great. And earlier you were talking about some of the pros and cons of working with certain distributors. What are some of the top 3 things that you're thinking about looking for when you're working through the contracts and talking to different distributors? What are some of those pros and cons that really stand out to you?
Well, I think in the initial conversation, what we're concerned about is number of reps, what kind of coverage they have, how often they're seeing accounts. It's a little bit different when you go from a beer distributor to a spirits or wine distributor to an independent or a craft. So cadence of communication with retail. So that's one of the things that we look at. Where do they cover? Oftentimes they'll have an exclusive territory that they handle for certain products, and then they have an expanded territory that they use for some of these other products. And it's, like I said, piecing that puzzle together to try to figure out who makes sense. Can they handle this entire area, or are they really good in this footprint and not as good in another one? And then beyond that, it's really just some of the terms. And there's about 3 or 4 things that I always look for in a distributor. And then really, I think it's getting pretty comfortable with our ability to work with them in a new category and to maximize their capabilities with what we can bring to the table too.
Makes sense. Well, tell us a little bit about the future. What's the future hold for CLRTY? What are you hoping to achieve in the next 12, 24 months? Yeah. To the extent that you're willing to divulge.
Yeah, my team would say a lot, but I think we're on a fairly aggressive expansion program. We are looking for partners in states where it's either explicitly regulated or that they've said, here's what our parameters are. There are a few states that it's almost like looking at a stoplight, and you've got green for go, you've got yellow for probably pretty good, and we got some red that we're like, hey, I'm not really sure. They're talking about maybe regulating it or putting it in a box, and maybe we don't want to go there because we don't want to get started and then have to pull out. So expansion is definitely what we're into right now. We've got a new line of products. Our soda pot product is coming out next month. The variety packs are coming out next month. We're going to add pumpkin spice latte for our cold brew as a specialty for that September, October timeframe. And then we've been working on some other things. I think that through our research project that we've done with the agency, a company called Broadhead in Minneapolis, we've been able to kind of look and say, hey, look, we think between a certain time frame, this better for you health products are going to be really important. It might be a little bit early right now, but I think we're looking at adaptogens and nootropics and things that will be specific to helping people with certain maladies. So I think that's part of it. We've definitely looked at other what I would call non-carbonated beverages, and then really looking at the marketplace and trying to figure out when do those things fit in, or do they? They may not. And so, you watch the market, you try to see, and we're discovering a little bit that buying patterns in the southern part of the United States may not be exactly the same as they are, in the northern part of the United States, and then even a little bit from east to west. So we try to keep track of that, and what we don't want to get is SKU happy and just start pushing a bunch of SKUs up, thinking that that's going to make it better. Sometimes you can overwhelm your distributor reps and giving them way too many things to talk about. We actually peeled some of our smaller package items back from the distributors, and we'll use those as an online item only, just because they didn't fit with really the capabilities of that distributor. They're used to selling things in cases that are beverages, and that makes a lot of sense to them. So trying to sell them, a little shot that comes in a 12-pack case that's really, really small is a little bit foreign to them. So I think, and it's hit and miss. The shots that we produced, I think were a really good product, but we got them to market too early. Shots really have started to become popular in the last 2 months. So we'll bring them back again. We had put them out originally right away because we thought it would be a great on-premise play. But on-premise had the problem because of insurance, that there were a lot of on-premise bars and restaurants that were taking part. They're getting better, and now there is insurance and writers' endorsements that they can access to cover themselves. But because of this insurance issue, there were a lot of these bars and restaurants that just weren't taking the profits. And so sometimes you can be too early, and I think it hurts you. And I think part of that is trying to figure out the right timing, which that's no perfect science for sure.
Yeah, it might hurt, but if it doesn't kill you, it's just a learning opportunity, right?
Plenty of those.
I also love how like potentially bifurcating the catalog also helps solve that problem of like not competing with your customer, the distributor or retailer. So you have your online products, and then you have your core retail products. So really cool.
Yeah.
Look, I super appreciate you kind of like opening or I shouldn't. I don't think that statement's actually PC anymore. So I appreciate you revealing, a lot of the strategy that you're using, and hopefully our audience finds it helpful in their journey. As we approach the top of the hour, we like to give our guests the opportunity to give us their last call. This is their opportunity to shout out their brand, where to contact them, pump something that they're passionate about, cannabis or otherwise. So yeah, this is your last call. What would you like to tell the audience, Scott?
Yeah, I'm taking maybe a little bit different twist than some of the other ones I've seen on your shows for the last call. But my last call is that there are 2 million galaxies in the universe. Think about that. It's a lot easier to comprehend with a clarity. And you can find it at CLRTY.com.
I love that. I love that. You made me feel very small. Thank you.
Well, I really enjoyed being on the show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always great talking to you. It was awesome meeting you in person up in Minnesota. All the best to you. Looking forward to staying on this journey with you and checking in and seeing how it's going.
Absolutely. We've really appreciated all of your expertise and guidance. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Talk to you soon. What do you think, everyone? Another great one in the bag. We missed my co-host, AnnaRae. I hope you're feeling better soon. I need you back. I can't do this all by myself. Thank you, everyone, for your understanding with our tough technical difficulties today. We didn't get to host a live show, but if you have questions, drop them in the comments. We'll get to them. I'm going to invite Scott to engage in the comments as well. Thank you for continuing to like, share, and subscribe to the show. It's growing week after week, and we are thrilled with the reach that we're getting. Scott was mentioning to me before the show that he was having people reach out to him saying, "Hey, I hear you're going to be on High Spirits. That's awesome." And that is awesome. I love it. It makes us feel very special. So yeah, thank you to our teams, Vertosa and Wolf Meyer. You guys are the best. Thank you for letting us to do this while you do all that. And thank you, folks. Thank you to our audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep your spirits high. That's the show.